All right, we are live, and in today's video, we're going to talk about ranking on your website. So, what's like the procedure? How do you get started if you're new in search engine optimization? You're simply trying to get your feet wet. And by the way, there's a full SEO series if you head on to our podcast. That is the Marketing Podcast.live or the Marketing Podcast on any other platform. Simply head onto our website, and then you'll find the SEO series down in the episode section, and you can get started in your SEO journey. Now, some of the key things we're going to discuss, or one of the things that I really want each and every one of you to take out from this presentation is, number one, have the ability to understand site structure. So understand how your website is built out, what are the key components of your website from the different maybe languages, that your website is built upon, from HTML to your CSS and maybe JavaScript and, JavaScript and C++ might come in handy. However, HTML and CSS are the most important ones to start off with, especially HTML. Just simply have an understanding of what an H1 is from an H2, understanding how to embed certain things, etc. So that's quite important. Now, the second thing is understanding Google Analytics and Google Search Console that I have here, GA and GSC, and GA will simply help you understand how people behave on your website. So that when you're optimizing and let's say you have a 70% bounce rate and you want to reduce your bounce rate, for example, you can actually see where people are actually bouncing out from your website. So you can sort of like optimize, see their behavior, and also check their geolocations, etc. And with GSC or Google Search Console, you sort of get direct information from Google about how people are able to find you, how many impressions were you able to get, how many users were able to look at your website, and which kind of keywords you're ranking for, etc. And by the way, sometimes when it comes to SEO, you don't necessarily need to have these fancy, expensive tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs, etc. Yes, they do help in terms of making work easier on your end. They do, they take a lot of the work away from you so that everything is sort of like automated, etc. But there are a lot of free tools, especially from Google, that you can use to simply do your SEO without even depending on any type of software if you're really starting out and you don't have a budget. Like I've mentioned, GA and GSC, really important, Google Search Console, to find out which kind of keywords you're ranking for, etc. And, the impression numbers, where your users are from, their geolocation, etc. And you can also use at the same time Lighthouse to see sort of like, the on-page score of your website and see what needs to be optimized, how your website is performing on mobile, etc. compared to desktop. Google tends to be more mobile friendly. They tend to prefer mobile. They do something called mobile first indexing. So it's one of the things that, you want to look into. And the third thing is user experience, which we're going to talk about on a later stage of the presentation, being that, Google is focusing a lot on something called user experience or page experience. They like to term it as core web vitals. And it's part of their core algorithm update for their search engine, which is quite important for you to always stay updated on. Like I mentioned, site structure is quite important. Understanding, your HTML to the JavaScript and the CSS. As you can see here, I have two sort of like pictures of the agency, serverdigital.io, and how, the websites look like. And one of the things about site structure is, in order to understand how your website is built up, you can always think of your site as an elevator, whereby HTML, since it's a markup language, it makes up the structures or the main components of your website, right? The framing, etc. So if it's an elevator, maybe the metallic components to maybe the glass components, or if it's a wooden elevator for some reason, now the wooden components, etc. Simply just the frame, the metallic part, the glass part, the door, etc. And then JavaScript, or the programming language that's in your website, it's what now gives your website functionality. In this same example of an elevator, it's the same thing that allows you, if you're able to click, let's say, button number 1, you head on to the first floor. If you click button number 10, you know, the elevator takes you to the 10th floor. If you click open door, it's able to open the door, etc. Same applies to your website. So the different functionalities come up with the programming language that you use, whether it's JavaScript or C++, etc. And then CSS is simply, the cosmetic of everything. Trying to make everything look aesthetically pleasing in terms of your website, trying to make it look as good as possible. For example, in terms of CSS, if you look at, let's say, Server Digital, the hero page, you can kind of see, there's some padding going on, there's some margin going on, trying to, the different colors that, are on the website. We are predominantly, black, pink, and some blue in it, etc. So in terms of CSS, let's say, back to the example of the elevator, it could be, for example, how the metallic components are made, how the buttons look like, etc. Trying to make it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. So it's really quite important to understand how your website is built up, which brings us to our next point, where HTML is quite important. And that's why I talked about, if you're new to, search engine optimization, probably HTML is the first, markup language that, you want to get your feet wet into. If you're not really knowledgeable about it, you don't need to become a master in, some of these programming languages, but you really need to have an understanding of what, certain variables mean and how to use them, etc. So you can kind of understand the definition of certain things and how your website is built up, so that when it comes to optimizing, it becomes even much more easier because you're able to see things at a glance and recognize optimization opportunities. And other things is, meta titles and description. Now, one of the myths that goes around the SEO world is that, meta titles and your meta description play a huge role in terms of your ranking, which is quite not the case necessarily. And hear me out. They're really important in terms of ranking on SERP. And I can give you an example. As you can see right here, I have sort of like an image of the desktop version of the podcast website. That is the marketingpodcast.live, which you can also check out. Links will be down in the description below. And one of the things that, this is a fairly new website that's performing really, really well organically. I've not done any paid advertisement on it, any form of paid search, etc. Doing everything organically, and there's a whole case study about it. If you still head on back to the podcast, there's a full case study where we're testing out like different SEO strategies on the website that really, really worked out well. So if you want to learn about that, you can check that out. Now, one of the things is that, the website is around maybe right now around 5 months old. And about 2 months down the line, the website was doing so well, it was getting over 20,000 impressions organically from close to 100 keywords that it ranks organically. Problem came with the click-through rate, right? Now, bear in mind the website is quite big. It has close to 400 pages. Being that it's a podcasting website where we've done, around 200 episodes or maybe a bit more than that. And each episode sort of has its own page. And, being that each episode has its own page and, there's some, also category pages in the website, not every page was optimized in terms of, their meta titles and description. Now, obviously, having a website with over 300 pages and so much content on it, I tend to naturally rank organically for so many keywords, and that happened at a really fast pace. And the problem with that is, as much as my website was getting a lot of impression, a lot of attention, etc., there needed to be some work done in terms of, the meta titles and description of so many pages. It's something that even I'm still working on at the moment. There's so many pages on the website, and as much as they're getting a lot of attention in terms of the different keywords that they're ranking for, both short-tail keywords and long-tail keywords, some of them are literally getting zero click-through rate, 0% click-through rate. And that's a problem because too much exposure, but less clicks. And it's a problem not because of the amount of organic traffic it's getting a decent organic traffic. Could be 10 times better, to be quite honest. However, it sort of sends a negative ranking signal to Google. And now the website is at a point where it sort of has plateaued. And we're not seeing, that fast-paced growth as we saw maybe the first 2 months. And it's something that has a lot to do, like I mentioned, with the CTR. Your meta titles and description do not necessarily act as a ranking factor. However, they affect how people view your website on SERP, that is search engine result pages, and how people are able to click through your website or not. And it sends either a positive signal or a negative signal to Google. And by the way, if you want to check all the pages that are ranked on your website, simply head on to Google search bar, type in site and then your domain, and search for that, and you can see all the pages that are indexed by Google and how they appear in terms of their meta titles and description, to see whether you're doing a decent job and what needs to be optimized, etc. And also check, which pages are indexed and which ones are not. Some might not be indexed because of, sort of like canonical URLs, maybe they're duplicate, etc. So one thing to have a look into when you're doing your optimization. Now, obviously, when you're starting off, up with a new website, one of the things is, you need a content strategy. You need to sort of like figure out how to get your name out there and how to create content for your website, etc. Now there are different tools that you can obviously use as a new website, and one of the things that obviously you need to do is when you're starting out is look at what your competitors are doing. So do a competitor analysis, find out if you want to rank, let's say, for certain keywords, right? So you've done your keyword research, you probably know. Keyword research, by the way, there are free tools by Google, or you can use, let's say, Ubersuggest or Ahrefs, SEMrush, whatever it may be. But once you find the keywords you want to rank for, and we have a rule where if you're a new website, 70% should be long tail keywords, 30% should be short tail keywords, being that long tail keywords will be easier for you to rank for them compared to short tail keywords. Long tail keywords have a low keyword difficulty compared to short tail keywords that have a really high keyword difficulty, tend to be highly competitive, but in general have more search volume than long tail keywords. However, if you're ranking for long tail keywords, it doesn't necessarily mean you're missing out on a lot of organic traffic, etc. Because one of the important things you need to understand is we are not really fighting for who has the most organic traffic. But as a business, you're obviously looking at, how much of the organic traffic you're getting, is it quality and, qualified traffic that's coming to your website, because you want people coming to your website, people who are actually really interested in, the products or the services you're selling. You might be getting, let's say, 30,000 organic traffic in a month. However, most of that's people just coming onto your website out of curiosity because you're ranking for some of these mainstream keywords, which tend to be the short tail keyword. But in the long tail keywords, they tend to be very specific in terms of the search intent, and someone who's searching for that, they usually, are looking for something specific. And if you have that specific something, it's easier for them, to convert and, become, paid clients or turn those leads into, paying customers, etc. So you're not necessarily losing out. It usually means that, long tail keywords, you're getting high quality traffic than short tail keywords, because short tail keywords, if let's say I type right now digital marketing, it's a keyword that's getting a lot of search volume. It's a keyword I believe we are ranking maybe 50th in the States at the moment organically, and that is on the marketing podcast. And the problem is, if someone types in digital marketing and you're ranking for that, let's say you're an agency, but the person who's searching for that is simply looking to learn, not really the kind of person you want, on your website necessarily, right? So long tail keywords tend to do good in terms of bringing you high quality traffic. So once you determine the keywords that you want, you do your competitor analysis, check how your competitors, what they're doing to rank for those specific keywords. Look for the specific articles, and you can use different tools like I mentioned, like SEMrush or like Ubersuggest, etc., to find exactly what your competitors are doing. If let's say they have an article on digital marketing, or let's give an example, carpet cleaning in London. Let's say you own cleaning services in London, and they're ranking for the keyword carpet cleaning, and it's one of the keywords that you want to rank for, carpet cleaning in London. That's also a long tail keyword, and you see one of your competitors ranking for that. And let's say they have an article that talks about how to clean your carpet. You want to check first and foremost how many articles do they have, or like what sort of like their content strategy. Look at their pillar content. Is carpet cleaning one of their pillar content, and how long is that? Is that 5,000 characters? Is that 10,000 characters? And then from the pillar content, what are the sub contents from that? So you want to figure out how they've simply written content on their website to be able to rank for those specific keywords. The other thing is obviously you can use artificial intelligence now with the growth in natural language processing, together with some of the marketing concepts, etc. We've seen a bit of growth in terms of content marketing. So if you head on, let's say, and check out Market Muse, or if you go and check out conversion.ai, or there are a lot of artificial intelligence being applied at the moment in marketing. And actually, I did one video and podcast where I was talking about, or I sort of kind of show like in real time how I use artificial intelligence to do some of the work for me, so that they don't need to hire any form of virtual assistant to help me with my work, etc. So it's one of the things you can look into when you're trying to write content and figure out, the best piece of content, or how your content, especially Market News, you can use it to check how your content compares to your competitors' content, so that you can try, using the skyscraper technique by branding to become even much better in terms of the content that you have on your website compared to their own. The other thing is obviously you want to check, how many links do they have on their website, and that is your competitors. How many websites are linking to that specific article, etc., so that you kind of have a brief overview of how many links you might need to get naturally in order to compete with your competitors, right? And one thing that falls under link building is also always to do the backlink analysis. Check out which form of broken links do your competitors have on the website. Reach out to people who are owning those inbound links to the website that are broken, etc., and have them link to your website or to the specific content that you have, with the messaging that your content is up to date, is much in depth, it's more relevant, etc. So that's one of the things that can really help you by finding out loopholes in your competitors in terms of their backlinks. If they have any form of broken backlinks, that can really help you when you're doing your outreach, etc. Now, the final thing obviously is to leverage on your social platforms. If you have content on your website, try and repurpose your content for different platforms. If you have an article, let's say on carpet cleaning, you can obviously repurpose that content into a podcast, into a video on IGTV, into a reel, or let's say into a guide still on Instagram or on Facebook, etc., into a post, or on LinkedIn, etc. So try and figure out how to repurpose that content on different platforms and have all of them link back to your website, so that you sort of like get your name out there, and also your content to find more exposure, because content, as good as it might be in front of your eyes, it's not necessarily worth it if there are not many eyeballs looking at your content. So you need to do some marketing and advertising behind it. And also don't shy away from doing ads, by the way, just simply to get the ball rolling. Now, as a new SEO, one of the things that you need to focus on, and it's one of the things we talked about in one of the latest episodes, I believe that was episode 197 or 98, 198, is branded search and the future of SEO. And you need to figure out how people can start searching for your brand, because if you look at SEO and if you look at some of the implementations a lot of websites are doing, most of them tend to do quite a decent job, and you can sort of see if you have a website that is this, has, same SEO capabilities, quote unquote, or efforts put into it, and another website, let's say your competitors, and they're similarly doing the same job, having a branded search or having people querying more on your branded search will give you an upper hand in terms of ranking higher or outcompeting your competitors. Now, that's some analysis that we did when we're discussing or trying to sort of like prospect how, the future of SEO will look like in terms of the tech that will come available, etc. And, at some point, we expect it to sort of like plateau, etc. So the kind of difference maker will be, the branded search that, you sort of get in terms of, outranking your competitors, etc. So it's one of the things that you might want to work on, having more people search for your brand, etc. Now, speaking about creating a content strategy, one of the things that, or one of the strategies that we also talked about recently on the podcast was on content sprouting. And this has the analogy of thinking on your website or the content on your website as a tree. So you have the stem that is your pillar content or your main content, and then you have other small pieces of content sprouting out from it. So what we could term as sub-content that make up, the branches and the leaves of the stem. Now, one of the things that, this is important, in doing is first and foremost, it gives you sort of an idea or a roadmap in terms of how you write, articles in your website. And all the mistakes I see, or, a lot of, newbies or new websites make is they simply create a website and, write articles on different topics, etc., without necessarily having a content strategy. They might have, let's say, their content strategy is, let's say, creating content or writing an article every single week or publishing as many articles as possible. But there's not really a strategy. This is simply just putting in a lot of work and, hoping that, or throwing, everything towards the wall and hoping that something sticks, which is not really a great strategy. Might work, but not necessarily. Might, plateau in terms of, first and foremost, running out of content ideas, number one. Number two, you don't exactly know what you've written or which kind of content you've already talked about on your website and which one you haven't. So you might end up repeating yourself, and it makes the whole process kind of hazy and cloudy. And simply having a content sprouting strategy where you have one pillar content, the pillar content is simply the main content. An example could be SEO, a long form content of about 10,000 characters on SEO that makes up the stem, and then sub content, which is now the branches and the leaves. These are short form pieces of content that sprout from the pillar content, and they explain in detail certain topics mentioned in the pillar content. And from the SEO example, a piece of sub content could be internal linking or understanding Google search algorithm. What this also helps in, and which is quite important if you're coming up with a new website, is internal linking. Now, you're able to link internally from the pillar content to the sub content, etc. And you'll do this by making use of anchor text. And this is quite important. You have to make use of anchor text, and they have to be as natural as possible. Now, anchor texts are usually highlighted text that have a link attribution. Now, they describe the outbound, inbound link briefly and provide access to other pieces of content. And they can be used to, like I mentioned, link pillar content to sub-content and vice versa. And it also helps, Google a lot in terms of crawling, because it's able to understand your site structure a little bit better because everything is linked really well, and that adds to your SEO juice. So it's one thing that you really need to work on. Now, we mentioned user experience, Core Web Vitals. It's one of the core updates by Google in 2021 on their search algorithms. Also known as page experience, some call it experience. It doesn't really matter how you call it, but it has a lot to do with your page speed, also known as page speed insights. Now, one of the things that Google is working on or will be keen on is fast input delay, which means the time it takes your page to become interactive, ideally 100 milliseconds or much faster than that. The second thing, largest contentful paint, the time it takes for the main page content to load, ideally 2.5 seconds or faster. And the third thing, cumulative layout shift, the time it takes for your page to become visually stable, ideally less than 0.1. And all of this information, by the way, you can find on Google Search Console. Simply head on to your Google Search Console, head on to the left navigation panel. You'll see core vitals, and then you can choose between mobile and desktop, preferably mobile, because Google favors mobile friendly website, and they do a lot of mobile first indexing. So you want to check how your website performs on mobile devices and work your way from that. Now, if you have a problem with page speed, one of the things that you might want to consider, not even you really need to have, any website needs to have this, and that's a CDN, a content delivery network. And what a CDN does is, let's say, for example, you are based in LA, in Los Angeles, you have your website there, maybe your business is also located in Los Angeles, etc. And let's say your website is also hosted in LA, on servers in LA. And it's someone, let's say, in Frankfurt trying to reach to your website. Now, information has to be passed from servers in LA to servers in Frankfurt, and then to the browser of the person looking for, your website in Frankfurt. This can take a bit of time, not so much time, just a couple of 100 milliseconds, right? But it does affect your ranking, because if one website is faster than the other, Google takes it as a ranking signal because they believe it provides a better user experience than the other one. So it's not really good if your website is kind of slow and one of the things that you can use to, like I mentioned, you can obviously use Google Search Console. You can also use Google Lighthouse that you can have as a Chrome extension in your website and simply check out how your website is performing in terms of, fast input delay, cumulative layer shift, and largest contentful paint, etc. However, with the CDN, what a CDN does, it's a simple solution where your website, especially the heavy files on your website, if you think about the images and the CSS files and the JS files, etc., can be cached or sort of like temporarily stored on different servers in different locations. So if someone is visiting your website, let's say in Frankfurt, and there are servers in Frankfurt, they don't necessarily have to wait for information to be sent from servers in Los Angeles. They can simply get that information directly from servers in Frankfurt, which essentially reduces your page speed and everything, making your website a bit much more faster. And there's more to that, but CDNs is one of the things that every website really needs to have. And if you're starting out in SEO, one of the things that you need to focus on. Now make sure to subscribe and head on to www.savadigital.io. Check out the website and also the marketing podcast .live. All the links will be down in the description. See you guys in the next video.